Ziggy Stardust did indeed rise and fall, just as predicted in the title of 26-year-old David Bowie's hit album.
It had become a burden to him, and the only way to deal with it was to shake it off completely.
Ziggy Stardust was gone, but certainly not forgotten. The character continued to influence new musicians, and was even an inspiration for a West End glam rock musical. The Rocky Horror Show opened in June of 1973, and was later made into a cult classic feature film.
So, come up to the lab and see what's on the slab.
In July 1973, Bowie had 5 albums in the top 40, 3 of them in the top 15, which was unprecedented for a solo artist. The singer's self-imposed retirement didn't last long. That fall, while Gladys Knight and the Pips, Cher, and the Rolling Stones were topping the Billboard charts, David released Pin-Ups, a tribute to some of his favorite British pop stars from the 1960s. He also set out to create a rock musical based on George Orwell's 1984. 21 songs were written before David found out he couldn't secure rights to the book.
David will always start a project with this idea, and it will grow and it will evolve, and it'll always end up to be something bigger or maybe a little bit different.
David incorporated the 1984 concept into his next album, Diamond Dogs. The first single from the LP was Rebel Rebel. Bowie continued to act the rebel in his personal life. Although he was still married to Angie, David started a serious relationship with singer Ava Cherry, whom we'd met while touring.
She was just a young girl, a lot of eye candy, and you're on the road, and he was always promiscuous along with Angie. They had a lifestyle that suited certain things.
Initially, David's wife seemed fine with the arrangement. But when Bowie moved to New York and began living with Ava, Angie's feelings changed.
She was jealous, she was upset, and even though she was doing what she wanted to do, for her it wasn't a two-way street. It was like, I want to play around, but I want you to be faithful to me.
By now, Bowie's method of writing songs was as unconventional as his marriage. He'd begun using a device he called cut-ups, a technique inspired by writer William Burroughs.
He would basically cut out words from an article, from a newspaper, from a book, wherever.
I tried doing it with diaries and things. I've used this method only on a couple of actual songs. What I've used it for more than anything else is igniting anything that might be in my imagination.
It's not because you're short of ideas necessarily, it's because it puts you into territories that you wouldn't otherwise get into. You wouldn't be led there by your own taste.
David continued his efforts to break the rules when he began planning the tour for Diamond Dogs. He envisioned an elaborate staging that would combine music, mime, and dance. Bowie wanted performance artist Tony Basil to choreograph the show, and his manager, Tony DeFries, spared no expense in his efforts to woo her.
When I was taken to dinner, David wasn't there, but there were several people with us, and the money that was being thrown around was a lot of money.
Even more money was spent on the production itself. And when the tour debuted in Montreal in June of 1974, it was unlike anything audiences had ever seen.
He was just willing to do theater, rock and roll, dance, story, everything.
It was very expensive. I can't see how they could have made a penny. I just think money was just going and going and going.
What he was focusing on at that particular time was his creative flow. David is a hands-on person on a creative level. But when it came to the business, I'm not quite sure if David was really involved.
But Tony DeFries was all business when he found out how much money the show was losing. He cancelled the scheduled London dates. This action quickly got David's attention, and he met with his manager to find out exactly what was going on with his finances. David was shocked to learn that over the years, Most of his earnings had been used to pay back the ongoing advances DeFries had been securing from RCA.
I do remember Tony saying, being in the room once when Tony gave some paperwork to a secretary and said, take it to David, don't worry, he'll sign anything.
I think it was a big slap in the face for him because, you know, you look back and you see the body of your work, and at some point you want to see how much money you've made from that body of work, and there was nothing there for him.
David believed that he and DeFries were partners in Main Man management and had expected to share in the company's profits. But DeFries informed David that he alone was the owner of the operation. Bowie was no more than another one of Main Man's growing number of clients.
David's, because his brain wasn't there. His brain was, you know, the big picture, the stardom, the moving the culture. But obviously the chickens came home to roost at a certain point.
At the age of 27, David Bowie was flat broke. The groundbreaking rock star had achieved worldwide success. But now, he would have to keep working and keep reinventing himself, just to survive. In 1974, David Bowie found himself in serious financial trouble. The rock star realized that developing an interest in the business side of his art was critical to his survival on the music scene. He quickly scaled back production on his extravagant Diamond Dogs tour. But although David was now cautious about how money was being spent on the concerts, his limited personal funds were still being depleted by his ever-growing cocaine habit.
His diet often at the time was, you know, cocaine and milk, so it was sort of pure white experience.
There's a fly floating around in my milk, and there's a foreign body in it, you see, and he's getting a lot of milk. That's kind of how I feel.
The destructive effects of David's addiction kept him underweight and paranoid about the world around him.
Oh, we're not stopped. Is there anything behind us? But no.
Like Ziggy Stardust and Vince Taylor before him, David Bowie was falling apart.
He was playing with the whole idea of self-destructiveness and about what can happen to people when they take drugs, and you know, he lived dangerously.
But even under the influence, David was still exploring the boundless range of his creativity. He started work on his next album, Young Americans, by revisiting a childhood passion, rhythm and blues.
The man studied American R&B, make no doubt about it.
Soul music and R&B music definitely had a big influence for him growing up in England. So this was just a natural process to become involved with, you know, musicians of color.
Bowie's backup singers included Robin Clark, his girlfriend Ava Cherry, and Luther Vandross.
That's cool. That's cool. Next one. Got to do it this way to get it.
David called his new music Plastic Soul.
Plastic Soul just purely comes out of his sense of humor. That poking fun at, hey, look at me, I can do it too. And I'm not black, I'm not a soul brother. But he managed to capture what it was he needed to capture.
She wants a young